Miles, it's easier to introduce you by listing the things that you haven't done instead of the things that you have done in the music industry. Because I feel like you've had every role there is, and you've done so much. But most recently working on an awesome technology company that's trying to change the way people engage with and interact with music and fandom. Before that, chairman of Parlophone Records, Warner Bros. Records, previously Virgin, EMI, and many more, which we won't list right here.
Yep.
Miles has worked with and signed artists that you might have heard of, like Gorillaz, Coldplay, Tiny Temper, who I remember working with you on, The Verve, Lily Allen, Paul Weller, and a list that's much longer than that as well. Please give a big warm welcome to Miles. So why don't we start, give us a bit of background on your career from your own point of view. And I've listed some jobs and some artists and things like that. Like, as a challenge, can you maybe pick 3 good examples of things you've done in your career that kind of characterize the different roles that you've had?
Well, I actually started, my background started in the business as A&R, which stands for Artist and Repertoire, which essentially is finding repertoire, talent to sign to the label, develop over time. And I worked through the A&R team to eventually, as you know, David kindly said, chairing the company and running various labels within our umbrella at Warner's and EMI. I guess, you know, aside from developing a new artist that has 0 fan base or has a very small fan base, trying to develop them and find their audience is one side. It may have been like we did, you mentioned Kylie. Kylie had recently had a lot of success. She signed to another label, had very little success with the record she put out for 2 or 3 years, was dropped by a record company. And people had pretty much written her off. And I think that what we realized was that her fan base was as strong and loyal as ever. She just hadn't been making the right records. And what she needed to be doing was making a pop record and not necessarily making a record with the Manic Street Preachers. No offense to them, but it just wasn't a marriage that was going to work. And so that was one of the challenges, in a sense, of how we would, what record we were going to make with her, and what was our, you know, how are we going to sort of launch her into the marketplace. And there was many discussions about that. Not that we used any data to work out she needed to wear some hot pants as well as have a great song, you know, but that was something that really launched the media. But the, you know, Gorillaz is somebody, you mentioned, and there you have, you know, there's lots of virtual artists out there right now, and it seems almost like the norm, but then it really wasn't. This is 1999, just at the most embryonic stage of the internet, I guess, and how we were going to launch that into a marketplace. You know, we had Damon Albarn, who's one of the greatest songwriters ever to come out of the UK, and Jamie Hewlett, one of the best and greatest illustrators and video directors as well. You know, the combination in our eyes just had to work, and we had belief in those 2 artists to actually do something really innovative and creative. But I guess when we were then launching it into the marketplace, you know, Damon said, I don't want to do any interviews whatsoever. None of us are going to talk to the press or the media. They can only talk to the characters. And when we're going to do, you know, sort of an editorial piece in whatever The Enemy or whatever it was at the time, there's going to be no pictures of me. It has to be the characters. And you have to interview the 2D or, you know, the other characters. So that was a challenge for the team and the marketing team.
I'd love to have seen the marketing team's reaction to that news.
Well, brilliantly, we've got great people, and they're like, great, let's rise to the challenge. How are we going to do it? You know, but then there's this sort of, you know, the industry changes in the industry, and I guess, you know, when LimeWire and Napster, another part of my role is, you know, outside of that creative side, is the challenges, the disruption of you know, those streaming services and peer-to-peer services. It completely disrupted the music industry. And then we were faced with, how do you compete with free? Because people were actually just obviously downloading and accessing music for nothing. How do you compete with free?
And the industry really looked like it was crashing at one point, right?
Well, it completely was. And, you know, we were in double-digit decline at one point, you know. So, I don't know. So one of the conversations, you look at water is free, but the water industry manages to sell high-end bottles of water. So we the industry realized that you had to make the consumer experience really interesting, and the audio files had to be much better, and that whole experience. And how do we get them in? Well, you get them in through a freemium subscription model, and then try and convert them from that funnel into a premium where they start paying subscription. Now, subscription then was something that isn't the everyday norm. We probably all got 10 subscriptions between us. Then, we had to, the mantra was, to everyone, access, not ownership, and everyone would have been buying vinyl, buying CDs. They've been even downloading into their hard drive. It was about collecting. It was about ownership. I've got this, I've collected. And we're trying to change people's mindset that they've had since the 50s or 60s, since music was born. Don't worry about collecting, just access everything. And so that was one of the other challenges.
With so many different stakeholders trying to take on that journey as well.
Exactly.
Artists, managers, goodness me.
Well, and then there's the ever ongoing discussion about artist royalties, and I don't want to get into that, but I think they have a very, very fair point about sort of the royalty rates through streaming platforms. So it's a myriad of challenges every day.
All right, so reviving careers, creating careers, and big industry changes as well. Let's talk about audiences then. And are there some artists you can think of you've worked with who are particularly passionate about creating like the right experiences for their audiences? Who stands out in that regard?
I'd say today all artists really do care about their audiences and become much more in tune into that connection. What I guess streaming has done, it's created a very passive relationship with your audience. It's like radio. You might sort of go to play one particular song that you like, and then immediately goes into a playlist, and it's sort of like wallpaper listening. So it's created a certain barrier between the artist and the audience, and not to put down Spotify in any way, because I think it's been really, or Apple, the other stream services, really important. So I think because of that distance, artists have really got to understand, especially the new generation of artists that have been coming through for the last decade, of how to connect with their fans. I just came from Cardiff last night where I was seeing Coldplay playing one of their stadiums, and I think they do it brilliantly in terms of how to engage their fans. And one way, you're in the stadium and every single person has a wristband that lights up, and every person in that stadium, whether you're right at the very back, becomes part of the show. That's a very simple thing. It's a brilliant idea, but also, the insight into, they do a lot of charitable work. The whole show is carbon neutral, and there's just a myriad of things that they do and touch points within the whole show, which is not just about the music. And that's because I think they really understand inclusiveness, I think is really important. The fact they have somebody signing the lyrics right at the front, they've thought of so much of what their audience wants from them, or, the type of audience they have, and how to engage with them. So I think they're somebody that just do it brilliantly and infinitely better than most.
And where does that come from in Coldplay? Like,
Well, I think it's instinctively inside them. I think that's the people they are, and I think that, this wasn't. I wouldn't say that they've suddenly, somebody presented some data to them and said you need to be like this. I think that's just what they are. But I think, it may be. It gives them a better insight into, what their fan base, where they sit, what they're interested in, where, not just in so that, the charitable causes they support, but, just more of an understanding around their fan base and their audience.
How about an example from earlier, like Kylie maybe, or someone from a pre-streaming era? Like, is there any artists from that era who cared deeply about their audience and really kind of tried to understand them and tried to meet their needs in interesting ways? I can't pick anyone specifically, but you're talking about the era of pre-data, or when data was really,
just really sometimes it was very one-dimensional. And even when we were looking to go out and maybe sign some artists, you were looking at whether there was 10 or 20 people in the crowd, or there was a room of 100 people in and people didn't understand, or whether they were singing back lyrics, and how did they know the lyrics when actually it wasn't even online because online didn't exist. So gut feeling was something that I guess the music industry had relied on for some time, especially in the creative side, in the A&R side, developing artists, getting the feeling in the room, understanding energy, and just hearing great song melodies, lyrics, speaking to an artist, understanding their ambition. What's your vision? Where are the touch points that excite you, or who are the artists or peers around you that influence you? So those are the sort of the qualitative data that we have now is how you would try and understand an artist. And look, arguably you could say, well, there was 60 years in the music industry where that worked. That's not to say that now we're getting much. I think, on the creative side, using data to form your creative vision, I think is something very delicate. But using data to understand your fans, your consumer, how you're going to reach them, where their touch points are, on that side of the industry, I think it's essential.
That's interesting, that difference between, and we heard a bit about it this morning as well, like helping with the marketing side versus helping with shaping the creative direction side. I've often wondered on the creative side for an artist or the A&R team as well, like to what extent is the creativity sacred and can't be touched by the realities of good old audience research and hard data, or to what extent does it maybe influence in subtle ways? Like, is there a line there, or?
And look, you can use it definitely in creative ways. I think it depends on the artist. Not one artist is the same. You can put certain artists into certain blocks. I don't mean genres. They're the purest artists that write and songwrite and create music for no other reason ultimately than that's just what they need to do, with no perhaps real understanding of who their audience is. Then you might have an artist in the middle that does the same, but they really do care what their audience thinks and really want to understand that, but it won't necessarily influence their creativity. Then you might have a real pop artist that really wants to understand it, maybe developed by a manager or a songwriter or somebody that's going to create an act, and the music and the songs around it, where they will use a lot of data. I mean, I think Simon Cowell once, signed Robson and Jerome, two huge, massive. I mean, he really understood TV back in the day. So he understood the idea of people's popularity through TV. Now, okay, has a great voice, not a songwriter. What did he do? He went to one of the jukebox companies that supplied all the jukebox to all the working men's clubs around the country and said, what's your most popular song? And whatever it was, I can't remember, Ferry Across the Mersey or whatever, and that's what they sung, and that's what they had a hit with,
There you go.
And so, but on the other side, there is artists that I think you sign certain artists because they are creative, they're innovative, and you have to trust in that. You have to believe in them to be that. And sometimes they'll have these highs and these lows in their career, and because it can't just always keep doing that. But you have to believe and trust in that their vision for what they want to create is how to support that. Your role as the record company is to go, okay, we're going to support you in that. How are we going to reach the audience? What is the audience reaction going to be to this? Is there a new audience out there that we are unaware of, or because of the style of music that you've created, maybe we should not be looking through these traditional channels, radio, because you've not made a particularly radio-friendly record or single. So let's look at another way that we can connect with your audience.
Nice. Can you name and give us some examples of artists in the purist category and then that middle ground where there's a balance?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you look at someone like, Nick Cave or PJ Harvey, might be right there in their purest form, and somewhere in the middle. I think maybe somebody like, Coldplay, who I mentioned, and then at the far end, you might have Steps,
I didn't think we'd be mentioning Steps and Robson and Jerome today. That's nice.
But nothing against any of those, pop music is popular music, and I never really got the snobbery of one is better than the other, because on one hand you could have a purist selling, 5,000 albums and the pop non-purist selling 50,000 or 500,000 or whatever it is. It doesn't make one better or more relevant than the other. And relevant, I think, is something that's really vital to artists today. And, being relevant, culturally relevant, socially relevant, it's so, I think that's so vital.
Is there a particular type of artist you enjoy working with more on that spectrum?
I've worked with artists across all those spectrums, and whether that be from, somebody who's perhaps a purist like Dr. John, who's a very sort of blues, New Orleans, or was sadly not with us, artist, or someone like the Beta Band back in the day that really didn't care at all about, whatever their fans thought, in that sense, in terms of the record they were making. To working with pop artists that have been very engaging, and the partnership's been very strong about what you're creating and how you're developing them as an artist.
Nice. So we talked earlier as well about the music industry being, I think, one of the first industries that was flooded with data from YouTube and Spotify and all these places, right? Is there any sense that there's too much data in the music industry now, or is there not enough data? How do you feel about this deluge?
No, I think the data is great now, and I can get, from somebody that, I was very, I was very sort of against data when it was just very one-dimensional, and very black and white. It was boring. Now it's so rich. And the quality in it, so why wouldn't you want to understand your audience, your fan base? And again, it's not necessarily to influence you on how to create or the artist to create their music, but again, it's just, I want to know where they're listening to your music, what other artists they're listening to, what sort of merch they're buying, or where they're buying their merch, or would they be buying music and merch together? And I think, to inform artists that maybe doing a world tour, it might be that they want to change in their set list, because actually there's certain songs that are streaming much more in Germany, than they are maybe in the UK. So you'd like to adapt and, give your audience a better experience, So I don't think there's such a thing as too much data. It's how you use it and how you want to use it.
Tell us about then any kind of downsides where it being used in the wrong way or getting in the way in some way. Are there downsides to this flood of data?
Well, one side where we used it, and I'm afraid very badly, and I kind of think back and try and look at it, and my gut instinct actually on this was that, why are we doing this? Because it doesn't feel right, but all the data is telling us that this is going to work.
Interesting.
And we talk about Steps, and Steps are around at the time having huge success. And we thought, okay, we want to get into this market, this pop market. We've had this success with Kylie at the time. We thought, let's go one step further into this pop market. And we talked to the manager then of Steps, and he said, look, I got this other new act. It's just like Steps, and we're going to do the whole line dancing community thing, which they tapped into brilliantly. And this band are called Scooch, and it's 2 girls and 2 guys, and it's pretty, and all the data's telling us. And so we said, great, well, how can this fail? We've got the best songwriters, the greatest pop art. I mean, this is brilliant. And we made the first single, and I think it went in at, 5 in the chart. We thought, we're off, this is happening, brilliant. The data's worked. And then we released another single that probably didn't do as well, but probably went into 10. We thought, okay, data's telling us we've got to now release the album. And we released the album, and, needless to say, nobody cared about this artist particularly. They liked hearing the song on the radio. They didn't have any deep connection with the artist in any shape or form, or the characters. And also, we were being sold a formula. They got steps, you know, and it was just more of the same, but not quite as good, you know. So what we felt, because we didn't have enough data at this point to inform us, you know, where we're celebrating on the Kensington roof gardens that we were going to have a top 5 album and probably spent about 100 grand on this party. You know, it was on a Tuesday night and the midweeks come in, which is like an indication of where your chart's going to go, well, or going to be on Sunday. And it was sort of around 60, I think it was. And we're all up there drinking champagne or whatever. And the artists there have been really excited. Which was something we probably didn't want to break to them that evening, and suddenly we broke to them the next morning and the world came crashing in.
Oh dear.
That's probably the end of that. But that's where we just use data and not, and I think deep inside us, you know, something didn't feel right. And so, but you learn from your mistakes, and nobody has success without failure, and, you know, so you just don't do it again.
I think plenty of brands have made that mistake of chasing good research, chasing good data, and launching products that end up failing.
Yeah, maybe, but there's a difference between a songwriter, I think, and a bottle of shampoo, you know, and or just a product. When, you know, I think her name's Laura, who's up earlier on this morning, talking about the humankind, you know, behind, you know, your data and your insight, and you've got to remember that, and I think that's really vital. And I thought that was a really great point. And so, you know, look, if you have a brand and you're launching a brand, of course you want to, you know, try and test the consumer. That's what they want, whether they want, I don't know, avocado shampoo or coconut, I don't know. Yeah, that's not my area. But with a songwriter, I think you've got to believe in the songwriter, believe in their creativity and support them in that vision. Because ultimately, I've usually found that when it's come to a disagreement on a single choice or a song choice or a lyric, I'd give all my reasoning why I'd think it was the right way to go, or what they should maybe think about, or maybe change creatively. But if they didn't want to, I'd never push them into the place, because if you got it wrong and you put them in a place where they compromise their music and therefore compromise the relationship with their audience and their fan base, that's 20 steps back, you know, with that trust and relationship. If they do something that they really believe in, that is absolutely where they need to be at that point, and they realize maybe that wasn't the right choice, and you've given them all the reasoning why you didn't think that worked, your relationship with the artist is deeper, much more trusted, and maybe the next time you'll be able to, you know, make the right decision with them.
Nice. We're running a bit low on time, but maybe if you had one piece of advice for your younger self who started out in the industry with no data at a time when there wasn't any, but now you've got all the data in the world at your fingertips, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
With relating to understanding data?
Or maybe understanding audiences, yeah.
Understanding audiences. I mean, just try to find, you know, trust your gut and trust, you know, your gut feeling. I still think your gut feeling is really important on the creative side. And, you know, but also, you know, recognize when your audience is telling you something, recognize when the fan is telling you something. And maybe, you know, there are certain artists that we continued with which really weren't having the success that would probably, you know, outweighed the money we were spending on them. And the audience was telling us something, you know, and so really, you know when to pull back, know when to pull out, or, you know, or realign your deal that allows you to continue with that artist that may still have importance and relevance. You know, I talked about relevance earlier. Just because you only sell 5,000 copies of your album, you can be the most relevant and exciting act in the world. But also you can have relevance by selling 5 million or not, you know. So I think that, you know, that's you know, probably how I look at myself.
Nice. We've got loads of questions in the app. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. And if you'd like to ask a question in real life, feel free to wave your hand. I will bring you a mic. In the meantime, how do you think catering to a mass audience affects the authenticity of artists, both in their music, their image, and their behavior? Is there a challenge there?
catering to your mass audience. You know, I guess if they're talking about, you know, do you change the creativity to align with the mass nature of your audience? I think probably subconsciously artists do to an extent, you know. The bigger your audience, probably the more insight you have into them, you know. I think music, it has to evolve. The most successful artists have to change, have to evolve, because the music industry moves so quickly, genres move so quickly, the audience moves so quickly. That's what makes it exciting, and that's the energy. So always evolve, but I'd say evolve in a way that feels genuine and honest to you, and not in a way that feels that you've evolved and adapted to please your audience. Because, you know, sometimes, you know, there's artists that can put out a record. I mean, Ghost Stories by Coldplay was probably arguably a very testing album. Didn't feel it was their most commercial record, you know, but over time it's actually had real success and was probably a really important milestone in their career. Sometimes artists have to take a step back, you know, and you know, realign who they are, because you can't just keep doing the same of the same. And just, you know, I think that thing about being bold, I guess Harry Styles is somebody that, if you'd ask his audience, his one dimension, you know, fan base, what should Harry Styles do when he leaves and he becomes a solo artist, I can guarantee it wouldn't be anything like what we see today, and how brilliantly bold and brave he's been, both not only musically and stylistically in his songwriting and his production style and his, you know, styling as well. And that, you know, is something that's worked brilliantly, because I guess the gut feeling was be bold, be brave, or the people around him, the team, whatever, but, you know.
Are there artists who've lost their way by chasing a mass audience and forgot where they're from, or forgot their core audience in some way?
Yes.
None that you've worked with, obviously.
You know, there are. I don't want to, you know, particularly name artists out there, but yes, there are. You know, and I'm sure it's become very obvious to them once they've done it, and they've seen, you know, the dip, you know, again in their relevance when that's happened. And that they've played to the audience, and you know, and they've actually, it's sort of, you know, they've realised that actually it's possibly quite, you know, they've become quite formulaic, and you know, people's attitudes change very quickly. You've got to stimulate, you know, and sometimes the audience isn't ready for it as well. I mean, there's records out there that, you know, we've released or other labels have released, that we put them out, and you think it's one of the most amazing records in the world, and it's fallen flat on its face, and no one's been interested. Well, you know, 2 years later, it ends up in Stranger Things or in you know, a game, and it's caught fire, and suddenly it's like it's a #1 record, you know. Well, nothing changed in the creativity of that song, nothing changed in the lyrics, and nothing changed in that song at all. It was about presentation, it was about timing, it was about relevance, it was about all those things, you know. So I think, you know, sometimes audiences aren't necessarily quite ready for what they think they're ready for.
It's a good lesson.
So challenge them, you know.
Really good lesson. Question from Mike.
So yeah, hi Miles.
Hello.
The Gorillaz have obviously just done a massive campaign around Cracker Island, and they seem to have done it in quite an innovating way. They live streamed on YouTube from Coachella. They created a whole community around Discord. Do you see, is that just specific to that type of artist, or do you see a future in live streaming and community building outside of just the live audience?
Well, it's a great question, and actually now I work with a company called Token Tracks, which is a Web3 advisory company, and a Web3 advisory company, and you know, working around digital collectibles, NFTs, you know, Meta, and so on. And I think that, you know, the reason that I moved out of what was, you know, the old version of the record industry into this, because it felt like an exciting adventure playground. also, because of the hearing about the walled gardens people were talking about earlier, and feeding these walled gardens and building up these great empires, and then try to get your data out of them, were not a chance. So what we're doing is encouraging artists to take more control. They've been taking more control of their copyright over the last decade, and artists are much smarter of the business than they've ever been before, much smarter about their audience and their fan base than ever before. So what we're saying is, stop that passive relationship, start a real deep, rich relationship with your audience, do it through Web3, get them on chain, own your data, do really exciting, not just around just music, around ticketing, experiential, and gaming, and all this stuff, and take control of it. Now, we're really at the start of that journey, but it's exciting because you're going to build your community and your data.
And I'm in total agreement with you, but unfortunately there's a lot of bad press around, especially the Web3 stuff. So yeah. You see it as something that the industry should be embracing and pushing forward on? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, look, the crash that happened this year, from a bull market to a bear market in early 23, I see it no different to, we had the dot-com boom, it crashed, and out of that came innovation, great ideation and a different way of using the internet, and it became exciting again. I actually think we're in that stage with Web3. I mean, the fact that we're in this economic crisis in the whole world and, we're all fucked everywhere else, is not helping us, but it will, and it is, and I see collaboration in this space and cross-pollination in this space. It's really exciting, and what you can achieve, and so that I think is vital. So yeah, I think we will see the hockey stick, but it will come. Rest assured, as long as.
Specifically for this audience, so sorry, just hijack this, but that's a great opportunity for brands, isn't it? In the fact that to support that area and help artists get into that area.
That's one of our key. I mean, there's a guy called Jason at the back who's our guru in marketing, who thinks about this, every second and 24 hours a day, even in his sleep, and loves this stuff. But presenting to a brand that you're rich, deep data, and it doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to be hugely successful. Just do stuff that's innovative in this area, that's creative. And brands want to be involved in stuff that has great innovation, so they can be either first or reaching their audiences in a different way. And that's right. And that's one of the key things with Web3 and that data ownership, But at the end of the day, you still got to do great stuff. And in fact, out of the thousands of things Jason tells me every week about how we should be reaching audiences and marketing, to audiences. And one of the things I just always make, just says, just make cool shit. Start with that, and we'll work the rest out. Yeah. Cool.
There's a good lesson there for every brand, I think. One of the questions from the audience was about trust, a topic we've talked about a lot, and other speakers have talked about this as well. Do you think that audience research is something that contributes to maintaining that trust? Is audience research useful in understanding trust and making sure that artists can keep that trust with their audience?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. You got, the audience, artists do make mistakes, and whether that's in the creative side around their music, or whether it's a brand in association or being aligned with something in particular that didn't feel natural or feel right for their audience. And you should know about that. I'd hope you've done the research before you would have actually aligned yourself with that brand. But some things just happen throughout the industry, and I think to continually understand your audience and your relationship with the audience, and what they get excited by, and what they're turned off by, I think is vital.
And 5 more minutes, excellent. Somebody's asking about the abundance of data and whether it's killing careers early. So is like playlist skip rates or some of this data cutting careers short before they had a chance to really thrive? Is that a worry?
I think, look, we all know that the DSPs, the streaming platforms, work purely on analytics. and that's their platform, and that's obviously how it works for them, and that's, good or bad, I think that having a human relationship around that is vital, and I think that a lot of the DSPs literally sending your music in, filling out your data form, and then they'll run it through the analytics, and if the skip rate's high, then it's off. But I do believe that the audience will find something through different means or different touch points, and so great music will always come through. Audiences are not stupid. You just got to reach them. You got to find. Just look at it. We're so fragmented now, and whether it's TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, it's social. Whether it's gaming or it's Roblox or it's whatever. Look at the myriad of brilliant ways to reach and touch your audience in a way that feels really exciting and keeps them engaged and keeps them moving through the journey with you.
Nice.
I don't know if that actually answered that question, but that's,
It's a good way to bring it to a close, I think. Is there anything else that you want to use by way of parting remarks? You've got a room full of brands desperate to understand their audiences. You've had all this wealth of data for so long. Advice?
Yeah, I can't. Look, these people out here are experts in their field, so I'm sure I couldn't tell them anything about this. But I'd just always trust the creative people you have, within your industry or your particular business. Get the most innovative, creative people, but then don't stifle them, and with too much data and analytics, so you become vanilla or just wallpaper. It's just I think be bold and be brave, and accept that you're going to make mistakes, and trust in sort of new and exciting and edgy stuff that's coming through. And I look at somebody like Nike recently, and they do it so bloody well. And just recently, I talk about these guys, I think they're amazing. There's this young street team creating, these clothes and apparel and stuff, and they're called Cortez. Most people don't really know them. They're the fucking hottest thing on the street right now. And they were able to galvanize and get people, when they're selling literally about 200 pairs of their cargo pants, to get 3,000 kids on Shepherd's Bush Green, to go there and meet up, to then go to a £1 store down the Uxbridge Road to go and buy it, and thousands came. Now, that's not through loads of data marketing. That's just through them doing cool shit, And Nike, though, went, we love this, you got relevance, you're culturally relevant, come and make a pair of trainers with us. And so, that I think is brilliant. That keeps Nike always culturally relevant, even though they're one of the biggest brands in the world, because they're brave enough to do something like that.
Nice. That's a great way to end. Feels like a story of an industry that started off with gut instinct only, ended up being completely flooded by data, but wasn't corrupted by it, and has found a balance of respecting creativity and using data alongside it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a pretty inspiring story for all of us.
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you so much. Big round of applause, please.
Thank you.
Cheers.